So my name is Lauren Attanas, that's Attanas, and I am the granddaughter of John Attanas, who we are interviewing for the Atomic Heritage Foundation today. So can you say your name and spell it for the camera?
John George Attanas.
And tell us the story of your origins. Where did your family come here to the United States from?
Well, my mother came to New York City, to Manhattan. And my father came on a tramp steamer who had boarded this tramp steamer to get away from the Turks who were about to induct him into the Turkish army. He rode this ship to Savannah, Georgia, landed in Savannah, Georgia. And his trade was working wrought iron, fences and stuff like that. And he found out there was a rolling stock in Atlanta, Georgia.
What year was that?
That was about 1910 or 11, somewhere in there. He worked there for a while, and he contacted with his brother who was in New York City, as he had got an infection on his hand. It was tied up for his work. So he came up to New York City, to where his brother was, and that's where he met my mother, who came from Europe legally through Ellis Island. And she came from Austria-Hungary. And he was a Ukrainian by what do you call it?
By birth.
By birth.
And she was from Holland,
they
right?
met in New York City, and I was the result of their meeting in in Manhattan.
Well, and your sister Mary, what, 6 years?
She was first.
Ah.
She was about 5 years older, but she was sickly. And the doctors told my folks that they should get her out of the city and up to a farm area. And this is where we moved up the Hudson River to near Kingston, New York, a little town called St. Remy, S-T-R-E-M-Y. That's where we bought a farm.
What year was that?
What year was that?
Yeah, you were born in 1920, right?
Yeah, it was 1925.
Okay.
I was 5 at the time. And this is where I spent all the way till I was graduated from Kingston High School and went to college. It was just a typical farm life. We had, my father had a grape arbor, Concord grapes. He made wine out of that, but with very little sugar in it. He made hard wine.
All right.
And we had vegetable gardens, all sorts of vegetables. We had cows, so we had milk. We had chickens, we had eggs. And so the typical farm life. And there was my sister that I mentioned, who was 5 years older, but she was sickly And she was the main reason why we left New York City, Manhattan, and went up to Hudson River. Okay, well, I went to grammar school, a one-room grammar school in Rifton, New York, R-I-F-T-O-N. I had a one-room schoolhouse, and the teacher was a lady who was not married, lived with her mother. Her name was Anna Devine, D-E-V-I-N-E.
You remember that? Wow, I don't remember my teachers from elementary school.
She had a yardstick, and she wasn't afraid to use it. And also, my mother also had a yardstick, and she wasn't afraid to use it. So they got me into condition real early in life.
And when did you start being interested in science?
In science?
Yeah, in chemistry.
Well, that would be in high school. I had chemistry, of course, and that's a thing that caught my liking. And when I graduated from there, I went to a technical college, Georgia Tech. Full name is Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta, Georgia.
So back to where your dad
And that's
came up from.
where I took the chemical engineering. And I took what was known as the co-op, which was 5 years, 6 months on and 6 months off, back and forth for 5 years instead of the normal 4-year. And I graduated from there in 1942. And my first job that I got was with Remington Arms in New York State, up near a city in central New York.
Was that near Syracuse?
Yeah, near Syracuse. They happen to be a subsidiary of the DuPont Company. And of course, they were in the rifle and shotgun business. I got to, we could get a box of shells for almost nothing.
All right.
And go to the shooting range and shoot the shotguns at both fixed targets or flying targets. The war broke out, and they said, we can't waste ammo on this. So that was the end of that. So
what year did you start working at Remington Arms?
Let's see, I graduated in 42.
Yeah.
So 1942. That was my.
Right out of school, you got that.
Of course, in my at my co-op, the 5 years co-op at Georgia Tech, I had several, 4 or 5 different jobs, one of which happened to be in New York City at the fair, the New York World's Fair.
Yeah.
In '38. I worked for, let's see, what was the name of that company? Well, they had a concession to take people around the fair to show them the highlights of the buildings.
But you worked for You went to the World's Fair to work before Remington Arms, right?
other jobs. When I was at school doing my co-op jobs,
Yeah.
one of which was working for North Carolina, the state of North Carolina. They had a skeet shooting and a target shooting. We'd get a box of shells for a very cheap price. And then World War II broke out, and then they said, well, we gotta save they cut that out. But then the government got the atomic bomb job. DuPont got that job. So I moved from Remington Arms to DuPont. And my first job was at Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
So you went straight from Remington Arms
Remington
to
Arms
Tennessee.
to Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where I worked in the a lab there, which was making how the bomb worked, while the main plant was being built in the state of Washington.
That was the Hanford plant, right?
At the Hanford Works. And after a few months at Oak Ridge, I got shipped out with my buddies to the state of Washington at Hanford Works, Hanford Works.
And so how did you get
And that was on the Columbia River at the place where the Snake River joins the Columbia River. And it took a lot of cooling water to cool the reactor there. That's why that was chosen. A lot of cold water. Columbia starts up in Canada and was good for cooling.
So, and how did you get recruited to go down to Oak Ridge in the first place? Did they just pull you off the line one day and ask you, or?
Well, I started with Remington Arms.
And what
And
did you do for Remington?
Joined with DuPont, so it was easy
And
to jump from Remington Arms to DuPont.
And so when you worked at Remington, what were you doing? What was your job there?
In the chem lab there,
Okay, so you were chem lab there too.
making the ammo to go in the shotgun shells and rifles.
And so
Work in
DuPont,
the lab work.
were you approached by government officials on the Manhattan Project to go, or did DuPont officials approach you to ask if you wanted to work on the project?
No, DuPont, I got with DuPont later when the atomic bomb came on. And since they were, DuPont looked throughout all their companies to send them in for the atom bomb.
And somebody from DuPont asked you if you wanted to go to Oak Ridge?
I didn't have any. It was wartime, remember?
Yeah.
They didn't care for that.
So they didn't ask. And what did you know?
I was single at the time, too.
Yeah.
I didn't know. And how did I find my first wife?
Mary worked at Remington Arms, didn't she?
Yeah, she was working at Remington Arms, yes.
I remember you telling me she was a guard there.
Her name was Mary Rita Lill, Lilli. And we got married And then I got shipped out to the state of Washington.
Did you go to Oak Ridge first after you got married?
Yeah, we went to Oak Ridge first.
And did Mary come with you?
Yes.
And what did, so you got married really soon, not long before you left. It was a matter of days, right? Before you left for Oak Ridge?
I was at Oak Ridge less than a year.
Yeah. And you moved down there in a hurry after getting married, right?
Yes.
Like, was it days after or weeks after?
It was fast.
And so what was Oak Ridge like when you first got there?
Terrible. There happened to be a lot of rain at that time. And there were trees. If you had a tree there that was as high as this room, that was pretty good. It was studded. Everything was studded. And I was never so glad to get out of Oak Ridge, Tennessee. There was no concrete walks. If there was a walk there, it was a wood like made of wood.
And so what was your housing like then? Where did you live?
Lived in a box. It was exactly a big box.
Did you get a bigger box because Mary, your wife, came with you? Or were all the boxes the same size?
No, there were smaller boxes and bigger boxes. And I wrangled the bigger box. Yes, and of course, it was heaven to get out of Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Was there anything, did Oak Ridge have any redeeming qualities? Was there any nightlife or entertainment there?
The war had just started, you know, and it was all about business,
Yeah.
you know.
And what was your job like at Oak Ridge? What was your work like?
Working in the laboratory, taking samples of the process.
Were you working on plutonium extraction methods at
Yes.
that point? So what did you
Had
do?
a big concrete block with holes throughout that put the steel cased, and that's where the plutonium was made from, if I remember right, from uranium.
Yeah. And when you started at Oak Ridge, did you know anything about the atom bomb? Like, did you know what this was for?
We were let in everything.
And so they told you what it was for?
People who weren't educated, didn't have a chemical degree or some kind of a degree. They just went through the motions. They didn't know what they were doing.
But you weren't compartmentalized in that same way. You had an idea of what this was for.
The whole business.
So, and did they tell you that before you got there, or you got there and they said, hey?
That's a good question. Because I didn't write it down.
So you were not in the dark. You weren't as compartmentalized.
But when I went, the minute I got to Oak Ridge, the boss there told me what was going on. And of course, in less than a year, I was out of there to state of Washington.
And was there a lot of emphasis at Oak Ridge on secrecy? Everything had to just stay with you and your coworkers? Did Mary know anything about what you did?
Oh, I told her. I didn't keep anything from her.
No.
So let's see. What Richland, Washington was the town where our house was. Richland, there was the Tri-Cities, Richland, Pasco, and Kennewick, 3 cities together
In Washington.
at where the Snake River from Idaho joined the Columbia River. And it had lots of cooling water for the reactors.
And you moved there in 1943? Is that right?
40, yeah.
So about a year after Oak Ridge.
And I remember when we used to go once in a while to the Pacific Ocean, to the beach. If you went straight from Portland, Oregon, to the beach, that's where we were when the bomb went off on Japan. Hiroshima first, you know, and then Nagasaki second.
Mm-hmm.
We were freezing to death. You know, as you know how cold the Pacific water is.
The Pacific is cold, unless you're in Hawaii. It's cold.
You shiver all the time and you're in that water. It comes from the North Pole or up that way.
It's true, it's cold. So
So
when you moved to Richland, what was your job at the Hanford site?
well, I was a supervisor, and I had a group of men that actually ran the valves.
And what did your job entail?
Well, naturally, we started with uranium compounds,
Mm-hmm.
and mix them with chemicals to make. We worked on the plutonium bombs,
Mm-hmm.
and it was wonderful to get out of that mucky Oak Ridge, Tennessee. It was wonderful, although out there my hay fever picked up. And I had, that was before Kleenex, and I had handkerchiefs. I used to carry at least 3 at a time, 2 drying out and 1 at my nose. So there was no rain, but there was my nose rained.
Your nose rained all the time.
Yeah.
Did that affect you at work at all?
Well, it didn't help. Keeping a handkerchief up your nose. We just produced the plutonium nitrate in a heavy steel container. It's what we shipped to Oak Ridge, Tennessee. No, not to Oak Ridge, in New Mexico, Alamogordo, or there was another town there too.
Was that Los Alamos out there?
Los Alamos, yeah. The man who was in charge there had lived there, and he was instrumental in having a place put there. I did get a chance to watch the first bomb explode in Alamogordo.
You did?
Yeah,
How did you get chosen to go down for that?
I was lucky. So I knew what the Japs were going to get.
Yeah, and was that because of your position as a supervisor at Hanford Works?
Yeah, I was a supervisor.
And that's why you got to go to Los Alamos?
You know, it's been so long ago, it's lucky I can remember any of it.
What was it like seeing that first atomic blast?
Naturally, we had to have dark glasses when it went off. But it worked, and it wasn't too long after that before it was Hiroshima got the next one, and then Nagasaki the third one.
Yeah. Do you remember when you saw that test? Like, what did it look like?
Well, we had dark glasses on.
But you couldn't see anything, or could you see a blast?
Just, of course, we were miles away from it there, so it wasn't like we were up close. But you know, the war in Europe was winding down already, and some of us were wondering if we were going to get a chance to zing Japan.
Sure. And so
After working, we worked hard. Hours didn't mean a thing. And we also wore a film badge and two pencils, like the film had a piece of tape, film in it, and the radiation would darken it. And the two pencils would discharge the charge of the wire. And every day we got a fresh pair. And at the end of the shift, we gave them into where they had the people who did that to develop the film, and they checked the charge on the two pencils. And if they were negative, you were taken off the job and had to sit out instead of going to your regular job. And DuPont was a real safety-conscious company. And they had people whose jobs were just to make sure the workers took care of the radiation part of their job, like the time, and so that, and they would be the ones with the instruments checking around for radiation.
did you have to wear protective clothing or suits? Or did you work under a hood when you did your work?
No, but you had to give your to the laundry. They would wash them, and they'd make sure that when you got them back, that any radiation was gone. DuPont was really safety conscious. I was sorry that at the end of the war, you know, the DuPont took back their big guys with the big beards and the no hair or gray hair, you know. I was just out of college a 3 years. So we had to go to our next job rather than stay. I wanted to stay with DuPont.
But you stayed in Hanford, right? You still
Yeah.
worked there after you were with DuPont.
And my next job was with in the semiconductor industry.
Oh, yeah.
There was germanium and there's the other metal, the solid state. The glass bulbs were a thing of the past. I did get that job in New York State up at, let's see, that was only about 5 miles from Atlas where I lived
Yeah.
when I came back from the West.
Before you went to New York, how long did you work at the Hanford Works, and how long did you live in Richmond?
At the Hanford Works. That's the one out in the state of Washington. Well, I was trying to get a job back east because that's where I was from.
So the whole time you were in Hanford, you knew you wanted to come back east.
Yeah,
But you
Just
raised
to
a
come
family
back.
there, right?
but how did I come back? I don't know whether I paid my way back home. I can't remember. And in Ohio, I had to stay in the state of Ohio, but I worked on rockets and missiles
Was that during the war or after?
after the war.
Okay.
Then the Sputnik came along, and boy, and Germany was hot on missiles and rockets. But then I got a job with silicon semiconductors. What company was that?
Was that General Electric? Or was that
New York,
before?
a New York State company. That's how I got finally back to live in New York State.
When you worked in Ohio, did you work with GE?
No. Who did I work with there? They worked on the Air Force had the where they had a rocket to get the plane up in the air and then switch to gasoline. That was for the Air Force, if you may remember. You could hear when they tested those rockets. And finally, a man from GE came. He showed me a semiconductor. He said, "This is what we're making up in New York. Do you want to come up there and work for us?" I said, "Of course, mister."
And that's how you made
So I got back to my home state, finally, after many years. in Oak Ridge, Washington, Ohio. It was an interesting travelogue.
I'd say. I remember you telling stories of having my dad, Roger, and John out in Richland. They were born while you worked at Hanford, right?
This was out west in Hanford. You know, Roger had fallen out of a tree and fractured his skull.
He did that in Washington?
Yeah. Across this little river was Benton City, and there was a family there with kids, and the kids would go there and climb these trees. And it so happened that Roger fell out of one of them. And boy, we were scared when he was tied up in the hospital.
Oh, so he spent a good long time there?
You'll have to ask him about that. Of course, he was young, you know, wouldn't hardly remember it.
I'll have to ask him.
But she was unconscious for quite a while.
That explains it.
So,
And did Mary know what you did out at Hanford? And did the kids have any idea what you did for a living out there?
yeah. Of course, at some point, missiles and rockets came into. Germany was sending rockets over to England, you know. And
Mm-hmm.
that became popular.
During the war. And
Yeah.
did you do any work on rockets or missiles during the war?
No,
That was after.
that was not my
That was
business.
not your business. What were your most serious challenges, would you say, working out in Hanford?
Well, most of the time we were working in radiation, and it was they get mad at you if you made overcharge your pencils and your film badge and tie you up, take you off the job.
So how long did you get? I mean, did they give you an allotted amount of time that you could work in the
Well,
dangerous
you had
areas?
we had instruments, all those checks that told you how much you could take. So, you know, DuPont was a terrific company for safety.
Mm-hmm.
The best.
Did you know people who worked for other companies out at Hanford Works?
Not too much.
So you mostly interacted with people.
And I was hoping to stay with DuPont when the war ended, you know, and the project was closed up.
What year did the project end? When were you told that the work was finished?
Well, it was in the newspapers when the 2 bombs hit Japan. That was the end of it.
And you knew when that happened, that was the end of the project.
Yeah.
There was nothing more.
Because there were more waiting to drop on Japan if they didn't say uncle.
Did you have much of a social life out at the Hanford Works? Were you very social with your coworkers and colleagues out there?
Well, we were always kind of serious. As long as the war was on, and you know, we didn't know for sure. But like I say, the war in Europe ended first. Germany got the actually, you'd say, well, why did you drop the... Well, yeah, I guess they had to go ahead with getting Japan out of the war.
How do you feel about the decision to drop the bomb on Japan?
No, I didn't lose any sleep. I still don't.
No? And were you aware of that invasion of Japan while you were working? Did you know that ultimately that's what the bomb would be for?
Yeah.
Yeah. How did that affect the attitude of people working on the project? Were people knowing that they were going to drop the bomb on Japan, did that affect your attitude working on the project?
Well, we knew that, you know, the long march, they marched a bunch of GIs, you know, they were not nice to the GIs that they captured.
Mm-mm.
I never even wanted to go visit Japan.
Did what you knew about the Japanese's treatment of American soldiers affect your attitude toward your work? Did that motivate you at all?
Oh, it didn't hurt. It didn't hurt.
How about your colleagues? Is that something you talked about at work?
We were usually too busy.
No time to stop and chat?
No time to... And the war began to drag on, you know, for so many years, you know.
Sure. While you were working on the Hanford project, were you optimistic that the project would be successful, or were you worried about it?
I was optimistic.
Yeah? Why? What made you optimistic?
Well, being an engineer and knowing what was going on, that's all you need to know. And we find the Bataan Death March, where they marched soldiers. And if they couldn't walk, there was a guy that in New York who had been on that death march.
Really?
Yeah. A survivor, of course.
Did you know him?
His next door neighbor.
Was that in Skaneateles?
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What was his name?
I can't remember. Then we all remember MacArthur.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't have the death march. He left in a motorboat with his family. That's a tough job to put a person in that he was in. He decided to save his family and himself. But it left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth.
Including yours?
A little.
Yeah. And were you, did your attitude and your confidence about developing the atom bomb before the war was over and the ultimate success of the Manhattan Project, did your attitude change as you worked on the project? Or was your confidence and your optimism always equal?
Well, until you try one out, you never know for sure.
Were you worried then? In the time leading up to the test?
It's just something that has to be proved, you know.
Did seeing
And the one in New Mexico proved it, see?
Yeah, and did seeing that test, did that change your outlook on your work?
Yeah.
How?
When I saw that one in Alamogordo, New Mexico, sure. If something hasn't been tried, you just hope for the best.
So did you have any contact with any of the higher-ups on the Manhattan Project? General Groves or Robert Oppenheimer or any of those people? Did you ever meet any of them?
In the same room, but not this way.
No handshakes. Who did you see?
See, I wasn't too old that time. I was just out of college a few years. So I didn't expect to have special shake hands.
Did you ever meet General Groves?
Just in the same room.
Sure, same. Did he come out to the Hanford Works ever, or did you meet him elsewhere?
I don't ever remember seeing him at the works.
Yeah. Would you have
He
seen
just wanted to make sure enough secrets were coming out of Hanford. Mm-hmm. That was his job, to keep everything here.
So was there a lot of secret keeping there? Do you remember, what was it like working on a top secret project?
Of course, we do remember there was a machinist who was an enemy, and then the Rosenbergs, they got the chair.
Yeah. Who was the machinist? Was this somebody you worked with?
No,
Did you know of any spies at Oak Ridge or at
No.
Hanford?
not personally, no.
Had you heard stories or rumors?
But the Rosenbergs got the electric chair, you know.
Yeah. Did you ever come into contact with other key figures or famous people working on the Manhattan Project?
No.
Did you ever meet Enrico Fermi? I thought I remember Dad or Uncle John.
Fermi, the Italian, he didn't get out. He was always in the small group. Yeah, that's right. Enrico Fermi. I was just a greenhorn.
But did you meet him?
I can't remember. There used to be, there were a few guys that got overexposed. They had to stop their work they sent one guy to go in with us.
In with you where?
I can't remember that what he was supposed to do, but he had to get out of the radiation areas. But I must say, DuPont did a great job with radiation. And better, and you know, when the war ended and DuPont out of the bomb business, then GE took over whatever was left. And of course, they got into semiconductors, silicon semiconductors and germanium. But I thought DuPont was better for safety than GE. So,
Sure. And when you were on the job, were you working in radiation all the time, or was like how much of your job was spent in high radiation and radioactive areas, and how much of your job was
well,
not?
like I say, we had our badges and the pencils with us. But DuPont was mostly a chemical company, while GE was chemical and electrical and this and this. So being a chemical guy, I like DuPont better because that's my business, more of my business. But and the war was over with GE's, so they didn't have to be so tense.
Yeah. Do you have you read anything about Hanford and the cleanup of Hanford after you left?
No. I was happy to forget about it.
Really? Do you know anyone, or did you ever suffer any health effects from working out at Hanford?
Well, there was this one guy that was overexposed, and they shipped him over to sit with us.
Was that just temporarily?
I don't know whatever happened to him anyway.
No. Do you remember many of your coworkers at Hanford Works?
No. See, a lot of the people were from out west geographically, and I was from the east, so when the war was over, back east I went.
How different was it living out west compared to living in the East Coast?
Well, you know, it depends on where you are. If you're near the Pacific Ocean, it's quite a bit like in the Atlantic, only colder. But as you get across that range of mountains into the desert, and you're in like Sahara.
Yeah, it's quite dry and
Just like the Sahara Desert almost is bad.
Do you remember spending any time fishing or doing any hiking or anything out in Washington?
Yeah, in Washington, we like these big fish, you know. They run up the river, lay their eggs up there, and croak. Salmon.
Were they king salmon?
I think that's the big ones.
Yep. spots.
I remember you had one, you had it at a big salmon that you brought home.
I did. Well, that salmon is our bread and butter up in Alaska. I think I brought a sockeye home, but we don't get the king salmon like you got. Did you fish for them when you were down in Washington? Or did you ever buy them from people?
Salmon and there were other fish there. And there was a place along the Columbia where the Indians had a concession to fish for salmon from this crossover point on the Columbia River. That was nice, I thought.
Did you ever buy salmon from them?
Yeah.
How much for a king salmon?
I can't remember.
Was it cheap or expensive?
Wasn't expensive, no.
Oh, so delicious. Did you ever take the kids camping or hiking or anything out in Washington?
Yeah, we had a tent.
Did you ever spend time with any of the other families that were employees of the Hanford Works?
Well, in the immediate neighborhood, yeah, in Richland. We had some families, next door neighbors. And
did most of the people there work out at the Hanford site, or did you have a variety of different occupations?
I'm trying to bring back what friends we had. My first wife was 8 years older than me. And I thought that was, you know, in those days, women did not have the education that men did. Women came along later where they got a better shot at education. And with more labor-saving devices, would take some of their back-breaking mixing and thumping and all that. So they started getting education.
Well, I'm sure thankful for that.
So that's one reason why the first wife I had was 8 years older than me.
Why is that?
Because the older you are, the more chance for education you have.
Sure. Did Mary like living in Washington?
Yeah, we had some nice neighbors. But women have come a long way since when I was in my 20s. It's been good for women.
Amen to that.
But labor-saving devices have done the trick.
Now, I wanted to ask you, did Mary work while you were out in Washington, or did she stay at home with the kids?
Stayed home.
Yeah. And was she excited to return to the East Coast as well?
Yeah.
So you both were trying to get back?
That is, I had my hay fever to leave behind there.
So you didn't have it on the East Coast?
It bothers me everywhere, but just some places worse than others. And even just these co-op jobs that I had for 5 years, on and on. I had a lot of experiences on those throughout the South, mainly. Do you ever hear of a coach whip snake?
Yes.
One of our main jobs was with laying out new roads. You know, the chain, 50-foot chain.
This was down
The
in
guy
Georgia?
with the transit. Of course, most of the time, there was an older man doing that, and we would be going through the untraveled area, and we'd run into a snake now and then. And once my buddy had to make a pit stop, so he went in the bushes, and he kept flying out of there. There was what they call a coach whip. You ever heard of a coach whip?
Yeah.
It's a snake that's curious. Most snakes, you go like this, and they go. But a coach whip are curious. It scared the hell out of them. He came out of there with his pants not up.
Was that in Georgia?
Yeah, that was in Georgia.
When you were in college, did you know when you got to Georgia Tech that you wanted to be a chemical engineer?
Yeah.
So you didn't, I feel like now when people go to school, you spend a couple of years thinking about what you want to major in and you explore, but you knew right when you went in.
Yeah. I had never been to where my mother was raised, and Bonnie.
Your second wife.
We flew over, and I didn't know enough Ukrainian to talk, and of course Bonnie didn't know any. So we got a Berlitz. Berlitz had one for Russian, but they didn't have one for Ukrainian, so we got the one from Berlitz. And we practiced Russian. And when we came to this town where my mother came from, Halitz, Halitz, on the Dniester River. We knock on the door, they open it up, and we had practiced Russian to the Berlitz book. Not Ukrainian, Russian. And we started to say hello, and he goes like this: "We don't allow Russian spoken in this house." So that was the end.
Was that under when they were part of the Soviet Union?
So that shows you how much the Ukraine has tried to split away from Russia for on and off for a long time. Halitz. It rises in the Alps and winds up in the Black Sea.
The Dniester River?
The Dniester River.
Did your parents know about your work out at Hanford?
Did they know? We never even discussed it.
Nah. They just knew you had a good job.
Well, quite a few years after the war when we got there. But when the Germans were coming toward the east, a lot of the Ukrainians were, but then they saw them picking up all the Jews that lived in Holland. And right away, that changed their attitude. The welcome changed. Because they really, the gas chambers and all that.
Did your opinion of Hitler and his, treatment of the Jews and World War II in Europe, did that influence how you felt about your job?
I can't remember that. Of course, we were fighting Hitler, so it had to be against him. But there were quite a few Jews managed to escape, and a lot of them wound up in New York.
Did you
on the East Coast. And they bring their whatever valuables with them. But those gas chambers were something.
Were you aware of them while you were in college?
A little bit, yeah.
Did that have any influence on your career choice?
Not too much. Let's see, I started in '47. It was just before the war.
1937?
37, yeah. 8 years before the war. Of course, as a child, I spent my first 5 years in New York City. And then at the New York World's Fair, I spent 6 months there. So I knew quite a few Jewish people. And like as a kid on the west side, West Manhattan, where we lived, they had push carts with vegetables and stuff like that for sale along the sidewalks. Delicious potato kasha knishes. I can remember that.
How old were you?
Well, I was 5 at the time.
Do you remember Roger and John and Donald growing up out in Richland?
Yeah. And Roger had fallen out of a tree.
And what about John?
Well, John was whenever we would go shopping or anything, he'd always be running ahead. And that's one thing I remember, John. Yeah, we had this trampoline, the canvas, and you'd bounce in that, and once he bounced his head on something. We finally got to swimming in the Columbia River, which is right along outside Richland. There was an old rowboat that we somehow got. We used to use that. Had a couple of oars. That would have been quite a deal if it got away from us, got out in the deep water, you know, and sent me miles down the Columbia.
Did it ever get away from you?
Never did. Of course, I always was a good swimmer, so not afraid of water. Yeah, we had, within a half a mile of where I lived, there were the Rondout River, and then there was a dam there, and there was a big body of water where I had an old rowboat that we used to go across that.
Did you just do it for fun? Were they just fun
For
outings?
fun. The DuPont Company was all out on safety.
Yeah, you said that.
That's a good way to be.
Sure.
It may cost you a little more labor, but if you can keep people from getting killed or overexposed to radiation or whatever, it's worth it.
And how old are you now? 17, huh?
97.
97 years young?
Well, you could fill a gallon container with whiskey or alcoholic beverages. That would be as much as I've drank in my whole life.
You were never a drinker, were you?
No, never. Never. Because I knew the evil of it. It's not good. If it maybe makes you feel a little happy, that's about it. The worst part of the World War, I think, was the Japanese part.
Really?
And when they had the Bataan Death March. And a lot of them didn't make that, you know. So it left a big sour taste in my mouth.
Things between the Japan and the United States have improved greatly since World
Yeah.
War II.
But the Bataan Death March, that was one of the things that was sad. Of course, if I ever went to Japan, I wouldn't want to tell them that I helped work on the 2 bombs that we dropped on you.
Sure. Does that give you any pause, or do you have any misgivings about that now?
No misgivings. They can be cruel. Cruel.
People can be cruel.
Well, in Germany, if they didn't have to work on the East and West front, they might have won the damn thing. And they had to fight Russia on the East and us on the West. A son of a gun.
They were surrounded by allies on both sides.
Yeah. And the gas chambers that they had. And we were only following orders. You remember? When at the trials, we were only following orders.
Do you feel like some of that was the same on the American side? Did you feel like you were only following orders sometimes?
Well, if you got an enemy that can kill you, you want to kill them first. To hell with what's a reason.